women, the daughters of Kohanim, are not restricted in their marriages the same way their brothers are, is the pasuk says, Taima diksiv Rachmana, the pasuk says, B'nai Aaron, the text of the pasuk says, the sons of Aaron, v'loi b'nais Aaron, and not the women who are sons, daughters, and granddaughters, etc. of Aaron. Ha lav hachi hava amina nashim chayavos. So if it weren't for the fact that the pasuk seems to exclude women from the restriction, I would have said that it is applicable to them, even though it's not applicable to everybody else. My time, why not? Why would I have said women are included? Lav mishum de Rabbi Yehuda Omer Rav, because of the statement of Rabbi Yehuda quoting Rav, that of the pasuk includes men and women. So why do we have some restrictions that are not for everyone? So, low. That's not the rationale at all. The gamrinin may lo yikachu lo yikachu. The repetition of they shall not take spouses from the restricted people. So that pasuk is both in the plural and repeated, so that should possibly include women. Okay, so at this point, okay. So Ikada Amri, others explain the whole deal this way. Kicha itzrichale, the don't take pasuk is needed for its own sake. If it weren't there, I might have thought, Ligmar mituma, let's take the rules of Tuma, and Kohanic women are not restricted by Tuma. A Bas Kohen can go to a funeral, her brother can't. Kamash Milan, therefore we need the Kikicha Pasuk too. Okay. Rav Papa v'Rav Huna b'rei to Rav Yoshua ikle hin lehin tzivu. They were visiting a town called Hinsivu, Asrei de Rav Idi ben Avin, where Rav Idi ben Avin was the Meirat Asra. Boy Minayu, so the people in the community went to these two visiting scholars and they asked the direct question. Huzrahu ksheros lahaneisel psulin oloi. Are kosher Kohanic women forbidden to marry men who are, if they were women their brothers couldn't marry, a Geores or et cetera, convert, et cetera, Kalala, et cetera, et cetera. Amalahu Rav Papa, so Rav Papa replied to Nisuha, we already learned it. And we're going to now quote a Mishnah, and we're going to discuss whether you can derive the rule by inference from that Mishnah. Asura Yachsin Elu Bavel. When the Jewish people returned from 70-year exile in Bavel, there were 10 categories of yichus, of genealogical groupings, okay? Some of them we're familiar with, some of them we're not. Kahanim, Levim, and Yisraelim. The first three are Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. Everybody knows what that is. Chalolim, Gerim, Vacharurim. The next three are people who converted to Judaism, people who chalalim, people who are the product of a marriage between a Kohen and someone he's not supposed to be married to, converts, and slaves that were freed and automatically become Jewish when they're freed. That's 6. Mamzerim, Nesinim, are 7 and 8. We're familiar with them. Mamzerim are people born of marriages for which the penalty is kares. And Nesinim are this category of people who converted for ulterior motives by Yehoshua, and we have these various takanas and so on. Now, the next two we don't think we're familiar with, shtuke va'asufe. Shtuke are children born to unwed mothers. So we do not know who the tati is. And the Mefarshim explained that when a man comes to visit this woman and the little kid goes, oh, tati, tati, mother says, shh. So he's called a shtuki. Okay. And a sufe, no, that's just cute. And a sufe are abandoned infants. So if they find a newborn baby on the steps of the shul or the firehouse, and you don't know who his mother or his father is, he or she is an asuf, a gathered in one. Now we're going to see, now that we have the 10 categories, we're going to see if there are or are not marital restrictions in the Brisa, or in this, actually it's a Mishnah. Kahanim Levim Yisraelim Mutorin Lovo Zebozeh. Kohanim, Levium, and Yisraelim, there are no restrictions whatsoever. They can all intermarry, so to speak. Okay? Levium, Yisraelim, Chalolim, Gerim, Charurim. Levium and Yisraelim can intermarry with Gerim and with freed slaves. Okay? Miturim Lavu Zebuzeh, they're allowed to marry with each other. Geire, Charure, Umamzire, Nesine, Shuke, and Asufe, they, in addition to the Gerim and the freed slaves being married to anybody but Kahanim, they can all marry each other. So if you're a mamzer, you have to marry a mamzeres or a convert or whatever, or a nesina if you could find one. Okay. The elu kohanos v'chalo lo kotani. This Mishnah does not say that a bas kohen can marry a chalo. So that would seemingly, we would have a Havamina say that she cannot, because she's not listed as allowed in this pretty exhaustive Mishnah. Right. So Amalei Rav Huna Berei Rav Yehoshua, he says that doesn't prove anything. Kol heicha dahani nisve mahane. In all of the cases listed, the men can marry women from the other listed groups. Vahani nisve mehani, and the women can marry men from any of the other groups. So it's entirely reciprocal. Reuven can marry Sarah, and Sarah's sister Leah can marry Reuven's brother Shimon. Okay? Kohen, but Kohen, Kavan de elo boy liminsev halala. Since a Kohen male cannot marry a halala asurale lo katani, it doesn't mention, because it's not a reciprocal, it doesn't mention the girls can marry a halal. So it's just a stylistic issue. So Asalakami Rav Idi Baravin. So finally they went to Rav Idi Baravin and they asked him, what about a Kohen girl? Can she marry a halal? Amar lahu, he replied, Dardike, Kindalach, Hachi Omer Rav Yehuda Omer Rav. Here is what Rav Yehuda quotes Rav Av is saying. Lo huzru ksheros linase psulim. The Torah never says that Kohanic women may not marry a puzzle man. So the bottom line, I did not look in Shulchan Aruch, but the bottom line in the Gemara seems to be that the daughter of a Kohen is unrestricted. So Sid, you're going to invite us all to the wedding, right? Okay.
We'll take pictures.
How about Mel? You got to ask Mel.
Now we're going back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah, we had the issue of shnios, arayos that are not min haTorah that the rabbis added, like mother's mother. Okay? Shnios midivrei seifrim. That is the shnios arayos are only rabbinic. Boy minei b'nei biri. The people of the town of Biri came, may Rav Sheshis, and they asked Rav Sheshis, Shnia lebal velo shnia leyavam. What if a woman is a shnia to the husband that she illegitimately married, but she is kosher, and he is kosher to her, to the yavam when her husband dies? Now, if you recall, we said that a rabbinic punishment is that she doesn't have any of the financial benefits of marriage, ranging from the kasuba through even taking home the rags of the clothes she brought with her to the marriage. And if you further recall, we said earlier that a yavam doesn't give her when he marries her an independent kasuba. He assumes the kasuba of the dead guy. And when he inherits the dead guy's property, the kasuba is a lien on the dead guy's property. Furthermore, just to keep it in full disclosure, if the dead guy dies penniless, then the yavam does give her a kasuba out of his goods. So now, since we said that this woman doesn't get any fiscal benefits of marriage because she's illegally married rabbinically, she married a shniya. When he dies, yesh la kasuba me yavam aloi. Does the yavam write a kasuba for her? Does he have fiscal obligations to her or not? Kevin the Omar Mar, since we said earlier, kasubasa al nixe baila rishon. Her kasuba is linked to the estate of the dead husband, the first husband. And Leslie, she doesn't have a kasuba from the dead husband. That's one side of the question. Dilma, or maybe we say, Kevan di ilu lesla merishon, just like if he died impoverished and there was no kasuba, then the yavan picks up the obligation here too, since she does not have a kasuba from the first dead husband. Takinu lo rabbanan misheni, that the rabbis impose a rule that the second husband, the brother, gives her a kasuba, and then she gets a kasuba from husband number 2, the surviving brother. So Amar lahu Reb Sheshis Tanisuha. We learned this in a different brisa. Ksubasa al nixe baila harishon. The kasuba of a yavama is taken from the estate of the dead first husband. The im hoisa shnia laba'al, but if she is an erva on a rabbinic level to that husband, afilu meyavam ein la, then the second husband has a free ride. He can marry her. He has the benefits of her being his wife, but she doesn't have the benefits of him being her husband. Okay. Now, there is a problem. Now, we take that, but there's a problem with the text because it says, Afilu meyavam ein la, Miklal de Ika de Isle Miyavam. This would imply that the inference would be that there are times where the Yavam does have an obligation to give her a kasuba. So now that the first part of the brisa seemed to be a general rule, and now there seems to be a loophole, an unstated loophole. Chasure mechsura v'hachi katani. The brisa, as recorded, is incomplete, and you have to fill in words. And here is what the complete brisa is actually trying to tell us. Ksubasa al niksei rishon. A woman's kasuba when she's a yavama comes from the estate of the first dead husband. The iles lame rishon tekinu lame sheni. If there isn't anything in the first guy's estate to cover her kasuba, we impose the kasuba on the second guy. The im hoisa shnia laba'al, but if she was an erva to the first husband, even only really on a rabbinic level, afilu miyavam ein law. There is no kasuba. The second guy gets a free ride. Now, we mentioned earlier the Mishnah, there was a whole category of rabbinic lavin, right? We had rabbinic the Uraisa lavin, and then we had the rabbinic shnios. So we're going back to the Uraisa lavin. Boy mine Rebbe Elazar me Rebbe Yochanan. Rebbe Elazar asked Rebbe Yochanan. Surely.
Okay. The question is, it's talking about Yibum. What if I don't want to Yibum? I want to give a chalitza.
Fine. We're only taught that's perfectly fine. Then everybody's off the hook, and she can go marry a billionaire and live in Hollywood.
I'm talking about the guy who has to give a Yibum or chalitza.
Yeah, so if he does Yibum, under most circumstances, she's now his wife. And the only difference than any other wife is that the kasuba, if the funds are available, come from the first guy's estate. Then he writes her a kasuba, and he's obligated.
What he's trying to say is he'd rather be spit in his face than give any money.
Fine, you could do that. There's in all of these cases. Wherever Yibum is possible, Chalitza is also possible. And on Dalid, we learned already that Reb Zera says Chalitza is preferable. And Bazman Hazeh, Chalitza is preferable.
The Gemara, it seemed to imply that Yibum was more preferable than...
She's a good-looking woman. He's interested in having her. So that's what it's... So if there's no Yibum, then there's no question. They want to ask the question.
When the guy is looking at it, say, "Oh boy, this is wow."
He liked it when his brother dated me.
He never liked his brother, and he was always jealous. No. Seriously speaking, the only reason we're only talking about Yibum is because that's the only time the question comes up. If he gives her chalitza, goodbye and farewell. There's no money, no nothing.
Yeah, but there's cases many times when he gives a chalitza, he can't give a Yibum.
What? There are such cases. This is not one. He is not a shniya to her. His brother, she is his brother's grandmother maternally.
Right.
The Yavam is the same father, a totally different mother. So he has absolutely no relationship with this woman except that she's his brother's widow. She's not his relative in any way, shape, or form other than sister-in-law. So he is allowed to do Yibum. And now he goes to Bezdin and he says, if I do Yibum, am I going to have to support her? And am I going to have to give her a kasuba when I get tired of her? And the Bezdin says, no, enjoy her as long as you like, and you don't even have to feed and clothe her.
Okay.
Okay? All right. And we're going to get into that in a minute. That's the next question, actually. Boy, mine Reb Elazar me Rabbi Yochanan almana lekohen gadol. The woman was an almana and married the Kohen Gadol, or a gerusha chalutza lekohen hedyot, or this is the rabbinic level of lavin. Okay, I'm sorry, the deraisa level of lavin, which everybody except Rabbi Akiva says are toifes, right? Yesh lehem mezainos o ein lehem mezainos. Can these women go to court and force their husbands to support them? Or if the husband's not around, can they go to the bank and borrow money to support themselves and go to court and force the husband to pay off the loan? That's the question. Okay, so my comment was a segue. Hechidami, what are we talking about? What are the specifics of the case? Elema de Yasva to say, if they are living together, okay? But Amod Vahaisekoi. The Bezdin will send them Hazmanas and say, Tuesday morning, show up in Bezdin and write her a get. You're not allowed to be living with her. She's a love lady to you. So Mizainas Islay, so how can she demand support when she's not even allowed to be married to him? That's the okay. Lo tzricha. We don't even need to mention the case except in a special circumstance. Remember, when they're living together, they are, quote, living in sin, because it's love. But what if they're not living together? What if he married her and moved from Eretz Israel to Pittsburgh? So now she's his wife. Nobody's committing a sin. They're not sleeping together. Can she borrow money from the bank and then go to Bezdin and say you have to drag him back from Pittsburgh? He's got to pay the bank loans or the loan to the Gevir, right? Lo tzricha, the case only comes up, shahala achum medina sayam. He goes to Pittsburgh. The lasa la'achla. And while he was away, she borrowed money for food, clothing, housing, etc. So what's the halacha now? Mezayne tanai aksuba bididuhu. On the one hand, written into any standard kasuba is the husband's obligation to feed, house, and clothe the lady. What? Isla kasuba. Since she does have a kasuba, Isla mizayne. She does have this right to claim that her husband has to pay the loan. Oy Dilma, or maybe we say kasuba mishkal. The kasuba is only collectible on a divorce or a death, right? The Mapik Isla. So at that point, she has the right to collect. Mizayne, Dilma Tahakev Gabe Lesla. Since the Kohen Gadol has lots of perks to his job, there's a lot of prestige, he lives in a palace, etc., etc. If we give her the right to claim mazonas from him, she'll fight the divorce. She'll want to stick it out. So we do not let her collect from him as an encouragement. She's not going to get any housing. She can't live in the Kohen Gadol's palace. Take the divorce and go marry somebody else. You'll be better off. So those are the two sides of the argument. So Amar Lei, so Rav Yochanan answers the Shaila Lesla. She does not have the right to go to Bezdin and say her husband has to pay her bills. Okay? Now, is Vahasanya, but we have a Brisa Yeshla. She does have the right. So we have conflicting. Ki Tanya he, when we have the Brisa that says she has the right, La'acher Misa, she comes to Bezdin with a valid ksuba, and she said the Kohen is dead, long live the Kohen Gadol, but I want my money. And she can claim it against his estate. Ista Omer, others explain it. Amar Le, Rabbi Yochanan replied to Rabbi Lazar exactly the opposite. Tanya, there's a brisa that says yesh law. She doesn't have to wait for him to die. She can make a claim in Bezdin and make the husband pay the bills. Ha, ba'amud v'haitze koi. But we already explained they're not allowed to be living together. The Bezdin forces him to divorce her as quickly as possible. Ella desanya yeshla. So how can a brisa say she has a right to mezainos? That might be an impediment, as we said earlier, to a clean and rapid divorce. Ki tanya hahi lacher misa. So we're saying that the first brisa that says lesla, she cannot, is if he's alive, and the brisa that says yeshla, she can collect, is if he's dead. So now you know why women sometimes kill their husbands. All right.
Let me ask this question.
Surely.
Okay. The Kohen married an almana, which he's allowed to do.
The Kohen Hedyot.
The Kohen Hedyot. And then all of a sudden they decide they want to make him Kohen Gadol.
Stay with. He doesn't have to leave her.
We had that case.
He can't marry her, but once
he had that. We had that.
He was married up before.
We had that case last week. Okay, we had the case. If he is, even if she's only an arusa, the case we had was they were standing in front of the rabbi. He gave her a ring. She's an arusa. Somebody comes and whispers in his ear, the Kohen died, we elected you Kohen. The Mishdat Brisa goes on to say, even in that case where there's no harm, no foul if they separate, he's permitted to continue and do Nisuyin. So the pasuk only says a serving Kohen Gadol cannot marry a woman other than a 12-year-old virgin. Basically, we had that too.
But he married a.
What's done is done.
So
he can become Kohen Gadol and he can keep his wife.
If he dies, who was a Kohen Gadol?
There was no issue. Again, there's no issue since there's no foul. When the only time there's an issue is when somebody does something wrong. Here, nobody did anything wrong. She's just a normal wife like any other wife, and she gets the kasuba. And she gets food and housing and dresses and jewelry Erev Yom Tov from the Kohen Gadol every Yom Tov, 3 times a year. He buys her earrings.
Whatever it is. Okay.
No, it's Bedafka. The Shulchan Aruch says you have to buy your wife jewelry. I'm not opposed to it.
I'm sorry. It's not Marcus the Shulchan Aruch.
The Shulchan Aruch says you have to buy your wife jewelry Erev Yom Tov. That's her simcha, it says. You have to eat meat and wine, and you have to buy her jewelry, so she has. All right. Tana, right. And I have a deal with the jewelry store next to the Grove. I'm getting 10%. So please go in and say, Burr sent me. All right. Tana Rabbana. Now we're going to go deeper into what is a woman's, what perquisites does the women get when they're in illegal marriages. Almana lekohen, gadol gerusha v'chalutza lekohen hedyot, yesh lo ksuba. They do have a ksuba. Peiros, they do have the The Nichsei Malug does come back to them. Mezainis, they do have the right to food, clothing, and housing. And Belois, they do have the right to take home the clothes she brings into the marriage, even if they're just rags. And they're tzon barzel, so the husband has to pay for them, and she still gets to keep the rags. Okay, why they make such a big deal about rags, I don't know. Vehi psula, but as a result of this illegitimate marriage, she becomes pasul. She can't marry other kahanim. The vloda pasul, her children are halal or halala, depending on which kind of kids they are. The kaifin also lahaitzi, and the bezdin forces the kohen to divorce her. Okay, those are diraisa. Shnios medivrei seifrim, but rabbinic issues. Ein lo kasuba, we had this. She doesn't get a kasuba. Lo peiros, she doesn't get her property back. Lo mezainos, he doesn't have to feed, house, and clothe her. Lo bolos, she can't take the rags home. Vohi kshera, but on the other hand, since it was only rabbinic, she's still kosher to marry a Kohen if she's kosher to marry the Kohen. Like she's an almana, she could marry him if she's divorced. Okay. The Vlada kosher, her kids are not halal if the tati is a Kohen. The kaifin osola haitzi, and again, the Bezdin forces a divorce. Omer Rav Shimon ben Elazar, he explains, Mipnei ma amru almana lekohen gadol yesh lo ksuba. Why do they say that she is entitled to the fiscal benefits of marriage? Mipnei shehu pasul v'hi psula. Because as a result of this illegitimate marriage, they each lose out something. She cannot marry another Kohen, even if she's an almana, and he gets, it's a machlokes whether he gets booted out of the kahuna, being Kohen Gadol, but he can't, he's disqualified also. So, l'chol makom shehu pasul v'hi psula, whenever they both get penalized, turn the page, it's a level playing field. So, kansu osoi v'ksuva, we penalize the man by making him pay. Umipnei ma amru shnios medivrei soifrim ein lehen ksuba. So what about this rabbinic forbidden marriage? Why don't we penalize the man? We penalize the woman instead. Why? Mipnei shehu kosher v'hi kshera. Because they're not penalized by the halachic marital restraints of a lav marriage. This is only a rabbinic marriage. So then the rabbis feel, okay, we want to enforce our rules, so we'll nail her. Okay? And v'chol makom shehi kosher v'hi kshera, where neither is penalized on a Torah level with regard to other marriages, kansu osa biksuva, they penalize her financially. Okay? Now that's one reason, the level playing field reason. The second reason, Rebbe Omer, halala divrei Torah, the divrei Torah ein tzrichen chizuk. V'halala divrei seifrim, the divrei seifrim tzrichen chizuk. When it comes to Torah laws, people are careful not to violate Torah laws. We don't have to make gezeras punishing people more than the Torah does. But when it comes to rabbinic laws, people tend to play fast and loose with rabbinic laws. So the rabbis come down heavy so that people will respect the rabbinic rule. That's, by the way, brought all through Shas, that concept of why sometimes the penalties for rabbinic violations are stronger than the penalty you get thrown in Chayrim, for example, where you'd only get a patch, malchus, for a rabbinic rule. Okay, that's two. A third reason, davar acher, another third reason, zehu margila. In the case of the widow and the non-virgin and the Kohen Gadol, or between a divorcee and the Kohen Gadol, it's usually because she's a stunningly attractive young woman and the old man has the hots for her. Okay, in Torah terms, we say, Hu Margila. He was the one that pushed the relationship. Vizuhi Margiloso. But where in the Shnios deal, it's usually the woman. Now she's like his mother's mother. She's not a hot young girl. She's an old lady, and she falls at her feet in front of him, and she says, "Oh, I'm going to be out in the street. Please take me in." So it's usually in those cases the Chazal are saying that the woman is the one pushing it, and that's why she's the one who's penalized. Okay. Now, with regard to that, davar achar man tanila. Who is the author? It just says others say. Who are, quote, others, right? Ikeda Amri, some say Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Ketanila, that is Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Oma tam ka'omer, why does he say that? Now, he had made an earlier statement, remember? Okay, so why does he say, and this is a rationale for one. Okay, matam amruhu pasol v'hi psula kanso oso ksuba. When we said that they're both penalized on a Torah level regarding future marriages, so therefore he has to pay mipnei shehi margila, because he's the one that pushed the relationship. Why do they penalize the woman if there are no marital restrictions derived from this illegal marriage? Because the assumption is in almost all cases it's the woman who is pushing the relationship. That's rationale one for reason three. Ikeda Amri, there's rationale two for reason three. Rebbe Katani law, Rebbe teaches it, v'chalutza koi kashile. The reason for this whole second explanation is that Rebbe says there are unintended consequences if that's the reason for a chalutza. V'hachalutza derabanan islay ksuva. Because the whole business of a chalutza having the same marital restrictions as a divorcee is only a rabbinic invention. It's not a Torah rule. And yet the chalutza does get a kasuba. So why didn't, if rationale 3 version 1 is applicable, why don't we not give her a kasuba if she marries illegitimately? So Hadar Aymar, so Rebbe later on said, Kevin de Pasil lo midrabana. Since a marriage between a Kohen and a Chalutza is treated like a marriage between a Kohen and a Gerusha, that's already a marital restraint. And then the text may or may not be corrupt here. Zehu Margila, that we make the assumption that she's the one who's pushing the marriage. Vizuhi margiloso, but when it comes to where the marriages have no marital effect on the next marriage, if you understand what I'm saying, then we assume that she's the one that pushed it. Okay. Next, we had Rebbe giving reason 1 for rationale 3. Okay. My Ika ben Rebbe ula Rebbe Shimon ben Elazar. What are the practical nafkaminas for which version of version 3 we accept? Omer, and we're going to postulate a few and we're going to knock them down. Okay. And it'll get us to the next Mishnah, which is where we'll stop. Okay. Omer Rav Chisda Mamzeres v'Nesina liYisrael Ikabanayu. The difference between the two versions would be a marriage between a mamzeres or a nesina married to a kosher yid. Manda Amar Diraisa, the one who says that if it's a Diraisa deal, you do get your kasuba. Ha nami Diraisa, that marriage is a Diraisa forbidden marriage, and she should get her kasuba. Omanda Amar Mipnei Shehu Margilo, that it was she gets the kasuba when the husband pushes her to marry him. Hahi Margila Le. Here we're assuming that the Mamzeres left that fact off her resume, and he married her and only later found out she's a Mamzeres. So it was her doing, and therefore she doesn't get the kasuba. That would be the Havamina. That would be a possible case where there's a difference between them. However, we learned earlier that there is a way to wipe the slate clean on a mamzer, right? A mamzer marries a shechva. He has to deal with his buddy. His buddy has a cute shechva. So the mamzer marries the shechva, mate with the shechva. Shechva produces a son. The son is an eved because the girl is an eved, is a shechva, right? Now the guy frees them. So now the boy chick is a freed slave and he's no longer a mamzer. We learned that earlier. So if that's so, then we could say that the guy will marry this mamzeres because they figure out a way that their kid can marry a shechva and their grandkids are going to be kosher. So they're going to be less reluctant to have this marriage because they can patch it up and and take away the mamzer kite from the kinderlach, right? But there is a problem. The Rebbe Eliezer Aimer Hareze Everu Mamzer. Rebbe Eliezer does not accept this way of patching up the yichus of a mamzer. And so this couple who are talking about getting married are going to be afraid that the local Orthodox rabbi is going to hold like Rebbe Eliezer and not allow them to patch up their family. So holo margalo le velo midi. So there, the mamzeres can't say, look, I'm gorgeous, my father's rich. In one generation, we can fix it up, and the guy won't marry her because he's afraid of Rebbe Eliezer. So that possible nafkamina is off the table. Next, Ella Amar of Yosef Machazer Gerusha Mishanisas Ikabanayu. Mr. Schwartz divorces Mrs. Schwartz. Mrs. Schwartz marries Mr. Abramowitz. Abramowitz dies or divorces her, and Schwartz gets together with her again. That's an Isher Diraisa. Manda Omer Diraisa Rebbe, who says she would get a kasuba if it's a Diraisa din. Hanami diraisa, this case is mamash diraisa case. Umanda Amr Mipnei Shehu Margila. She only gets the kasuba if he's the one that pushes the marriage. Ha he margulale. Here, she throws herself on the mercy of the ex-husband and says, I'm out in the street. I got nothing. Please take me in. So she should not get a kasuba. That's the Havamina. But we got Rabbi Akiva. Remember, I mentioned him earlier in this year. Rabbi Akiva says this is a case where new children will be mamzerim. Any lav marriage produces mamzerim. So the Rebbe Akiva, the Omer yesh mamzer mechayve lavin, halo margila levelomidi. The woman would have no power to talk the man into it. It would only be if he really wants to. So that case is off the table also. And we try with a third case. Ella Omer of Papa, let's try again. Ba'ula l'kohen gadol ikabenayu. The Kohen gadol marries a girl who is not a virgin, but was not married before. So she's only not a virgin. She's not a widow. Okay? So now we have a case. Manda Omer diraisa, hanami diraisa. Rebbe would say this is an Isur diraisa to marry a non-virgin, so she would get her kasuba. Omanda Omer mipnei shehu margila, only if he pushes it would she get the kasuba. Hahi margila le, here the girl concealed the fact she wasn't a virgin. That's the presumption. So it's her fault that they married, and she should not get the kasuba. So that would be a havamina for a third case. But we can upslug that too because of the equal playing field rule. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, the Omer yesh chalal mechayve asay, that the child would be a halal, even if it's only a violation of the asay. You must marry a virgin. Halo margila velomidi. There, he would check carefully into the background of this girl, and she has some suspect background. He marries her anyway. It's his fault. So that case is off the table too. So final shot. We have another shot, number 4. Ella Omer Ravashi Mechazer suffix Otoso. The husband has his suspicions about his wife's extracurricular activities. No proof, just suspicions, and he takes her back. In other words, they patch up this rough spot in their marriage and they live happily ever after. So Ika Benayu, that would be a case where the two opinions would have a genuine nafkamina. Manda Aimer diraisa, ha nami diraisa. According to the one who says the Raisa rule, she gets her kasuba. Here it's clearly a deraisa rule. Once he suspects her, he can no longer be with her until he proves it one way or the other with the potion. Right? Omanda Omer Mipnei Shehu Margila, the one who says that she only gets the kasuba if it was his doing that they have the relationship. Ha he margilale. Here, the woman puts on a cute negligee and entices him to come home. So we wouldn't give her a kasuba. But we're going to knock that out also. L'Rebbe Masna ben Choresh. According to Rav Masya ben Choresh, the Omar, Afilu hoylech baila lahash kosa, uba olecha b'derech, asa zaina. If they are on their way to Jerusalem and they share the same sleeping bag and nature takes its course, that ends the whole sota process. Okay? Hello, Margale, velo mide. There, she, he makes her into a zina. So a soita would not be able to persuade her husband. He's got to be a willing participant. So that case doesn't work either. Ella. So now the bottom line. Ella, Omar Mar Bar Ravashi, Mar, that's a name now, not a title. The son of Ravashi says, Sota Vadai Ikabanai. A woman who's a genuine sota. And it takes a day or two, whatever the process of her bloating and blowing up. So, what? Whatever it is, the point is that the husband sleeps with her even though he sees she's getting a belly. So there, it's clearly, that's the ikavanayu. It's a diraisa, so she should get the kasuba, but she obviously enticed him, oh, like one last time before I die. So she shouldn't get the kasuba. And that would be the real case where there's a different din, and we will do the next Mishnah tomorrow because it's very late. Okay, I did the best I can. I'm sorry if it wasn't clear.
Not easy explaining all these.
No, I go over it a couple of
Besides that,
times.
things that are not familiar for us, you know.
No, it's not familiar for me either.
Hopefully they're not familiar to us, these situations.
No, all these, there is a, I don't mean, and do not take this back to my wife, but you see the guys who are marrying again in older age,
No,
and they walk holding hands.
I was glad to give you a ride.
I've